Hi everyone, welcome to the Theta panel discussion, where we're going to discuss the latest tech news headlines and reflect on how this impacts our businesses. I'm going to first introduce our great panel for today. We've got Andrew Taylor, head of our product and innovation arm at Theta. We've got Gary, head of our digital and data teams. Gary, and we've got Jeff, who heads up our digital practice. And I'm Liz.
Hello.
I head up the cybersecurity practice at Theta. So let's get straight into it. First of all, the topic of the month, DeepSeek. Obviously, it's been hitting our headlines, and a lot of discussions been happening. So our first question for the panel today: is DeepSeek a storm in a teacup, or is it a truly disruptive solution in an already disruptive space? Over to you, Andrew.
I mean, in some ways it is quite disruptive. Obviously, it's had an impact on the share market. I think what it showed is there's maybe a different way of achieving the performance we've seen in AI at a much cheaper price point, or using different methods. And I guess a lot of people are heavily invested in lots of chips are required to do this. And if you find a way that's many times cheaper to do it, then that somewhat undermines that plan. So I think it's sort of pulled the wool out a little bit of the market until people understood what the implication is, and I think they're still working through that. So it is quite disruptive from that perspective. Yes. Yeah.
From a technology perspective, is it open source?
It's kind of what they call like an open weights or open model. Like you can download it and you can run it locally. That doesn't mean that you have full insight into how it works, but it is possible to run it, use their website and use their mobile app. They brought that out as well, or just download it yourself and run it on your hardware if you've got sufficiently powerful hardware, of course, to run it. Yeah.
It is more open than OpenAI, though, as far as I understand. OpenAI still got a few more black boxes in there compared to DeepSeek.
It's more similar to Meta's Llama models, which you can also download and run yourself, but more powerful than those models.
Yeah, I thought one of the interesting things about it was not only did they come up with some pretty clever ways to reduce the mathematical computations, which therefore required a smaller number of chips. And it was, it took a lot of very smart people to figure out how to do it more simply, but they in the end shared a lot of that to say, well, here's how we did it, because they want the market to be more competitive that way.
Yeah, well, I think going back to the original question, Liz, about, is it a storm in a teacup or is it disruptive? I think it's going to be very disruptive, because I think what we're going to find is more and more of these types of solutions coming up and becoming available that are cheaper and quicker and easier to create than anybody at first perceived. I think everybody was in a bit of a bubble in thinking that the only way to get this working was to use, NVIDIA's chips and so on. And I think this kind of broke that bubble, and that only leads to more innovation and more opportunities for cheaper models to be created and made available. So I think it is going to be disruptive. Maybe not DeepSeek itself, but I think there'll be, it's the start of probably a new wave of cheaper models to come out.
Yeah, we're seeing DeepSeek being a lot cheaper to run than OpenAI, for example, right, Andrew?
It is cheaper. I think, well, certainly it is cheaper from if you're using the free version of ChatGPT, then you can use the free equivalent version of DeepSeek, but it's much more powerful. It's more like using the paid version. So I think that's why a lot of people have switched to using it. I certainly know my son, who's into using AI stuff, is if he can get his hands on the more powerful model for cheaper, then he's going to do that. So there is an attractiveness there. I think if you look at it from an API usage perspective, it is also quite a lot cheaper than OpenAI to use. But then I would argue that OpenAI is already pretty cheap at an API basis. It's not that expensive to use anyway. It's much more expensive if you're using it like on a per user account basis for the Pro Plus and the team plans. But on an API basis, it's actually pretty economical. But yeah, DeepSeek is even cheaper, but that's obviously using their hosted version, and for some people that's pretty problematic. You're running out of China or if you're using the Chinese mobile app on your phone, then that's also problematic. A lot of governments have said we're not running that DeepSeek on your government devices. We're nervous about that. So it has price is not the only issue, I'd say. Yeah.
Liz, I guess a question, you being our security czar, I see like New York State Department's banned DeepSeek on all government devices. How do you see companies like ours or any other sort of commercial company working to either prevent certain models from being, or certain products from being used, or how do you actually deal with the security aspect of models developed, outside of what we would call sort of your mainstream technology developers, in terms of a security perspective?
Yeah, obviously, DeepSeek initially, everyone was talking about the censorship of certain, certain queries in the model. And more recently, we've seen it's able to be jailbroken. So you can kind of hack it to tell you how to make, for example, a Molotov cocktail, if that's what you want to do. And also it's had a data leakage as well. So, it's not looking great from a security perspective. There's a couple of aspects. You could, as an organization, use something like a cloud security broker that stops your users from going to certain sites, but it's a bit like whack-a-mole at the moment with these LLMs coming up, and that's going to be really challenging to do. Microsoft Purview's adding in the ability to see what AI your users are using and to control it that way. What we've done, as you know, at Theta is kind of more of the carrot approach than the stick approach, and give them a model that they can use within our enterprise environment that's secure, and we have data protection policies in place around that. So we have our Theta Assist AI tool, and that gives our teams, access to the latest AI tools without, needing to go to these other third-party, not so well controlled, and not with not as many safety barriers in place. So that's the approach we're taking. But you can use technology. Obviously, there's policy. It's important to have good policies and be clear to your users around what's expected of them and what you don't want them to do, and data confidentiality, data privacy, and all those, those good things as well. So there's a lot to that when you lift up that particular rock.
And in terms of people's smartphones, right? Those are a lot of the time paid for by let's say Theta, but they're people's own phones. How do you get around people downloading DeepSeek onto their, or an alternative which is pretty risky, and using that on a company phone?
Yeah, I guess with company phones you can control what they can access and download onto their device. If you've got BYOD, then you probably want to put a container around your company data and protect it that way. But yeah, at the end of the day, we're all going to, we're all interested in this new technology. We're all going to give it a go. So it's about protecting your data in the best way you can, while also letting your users be,
guardrails.
Yeah, guardrails, but also you don't want to stop the innovation, right? So it's about finding that balance. And there's lots of technology out there these days to help with that.
Yeah. Sorry, Jeff, you were going to say something.
Yeah, another comment on the pricing trends we've seen. I thought it was interesting that, although price has become a big talking point with DeepSeek, we've seen the biggest theme with the OpenAI models coming out lately have been more for less. We can give you more reasoning, more accuracy for less computational power, and therefore less cost. And I think that line was already trending down to begin with, and it might not be long before there's a reasonable amount of parity between that and DeepSeek and others out there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Talking about those advancements and these new models, DeepSeek kind of stole the thunder of OpenAI's announcement of their O3 reasoning model. So what's the differences between, for example, OpenAI's O3 model and DeepSeek, and a little bit about that?
I mean, like both OpenAI and DeepSeek have come out with a standard LLM style model and then a reasoning model. Those reasoning models, they're quite interesting. Obviously, OpenAI brought out their first one, which was O1. And I think they seem to have skipped O2 and gone straight to O3 somehow, which they announced in December. And then they've released to the public kind of a couple of cut down versions of O3 just this year. And yeah, they're a different kind of beast in terms of how they have a chain of thought process and how they check their own thinking and validate their workings in a kind of iterative way, and increasingly starting to use tools. AI has access to other tools, like maybe you can write a program that it can run, that it can check the output of that to solve things. So that I'm not really clear in my mind whether the models are doing anything completely different or whether it's a composition of models to do things and have multiple passes over the same material. Certainly when they ran the O3 model, and they have like a very high reasoning mode for O3, and they ran it on like an AGI test that people have developed. There's an organization called ArcPrize, which is trying to develop a test for AGI, and they ran the O3 model on that, and in its very high reasoning mode, it scored 87.5%, with the previous best being 55%. And that was expensive. Like I think it was well over 10 grand to run that test. And there's another test which is called I think it's called like the final test, which is like basically put experts across the world putting together the most complicated problems, which would indicate that the AI would be a world-class expert in any topic, and the O3 model scored 26% on that. And so those are pretty remarkable achievements, because these are like for the final test, these are unseen problems which take a lot of thinking and validation to pass them. So they're not high school maths, they're doctorate physics or things like that, or doctorate level medical things. So it's just scored 26% on them is quite remarkable, but at a very high cost. And so then what they've done is said, well, we're not going to give that incredibly high cost engine to people, but we will find a way to optimize it down and create mini versions of that, which have improved reasoning, and maybe they work particularly well for coding, for instance, or a narrower set of tasks, but at least we can give people that to work with. And I think for sure the DeepSeek team bringing their stuff out probably accelerated the release of that O3 capability from OpenAI.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
I guess
It's huge,
yeah, I guess one of the things, coming out of your question, what's the difference between the different models, touches on a topic of AI governance. And in terms of AI governance, one of the things that you want to try and achieve is transparency. In other words, understanding how the models that you use are coming up with the answers that they're providing. And I think that's one of the bigger problems that everybody faces right now is nobody, the vast majority of people who use these products, whether it's in a commercial sense or whether it's for private use, don't actually understand what is happening behind the scenes in terms of possible bias, in terms of any type of understanding with regards to what these algorithms and what these LLMs are actually doing. And I think that's what we've got to, everybody's going to have to face up to at some point is we have to find a way to be able to understand what's happening and how these answers are being formulated. I know there was an experiment where they were trying to disclose or show that the thinking behind or the reasoning when they had two models running against each other. One was a more powerful model than the other model, and it was being used to try and provide an understandable view or version of how the weaker model was coming up with its answers. And it wasn't fantastic, it wasn't super good, but I think it's a start. And I think at some point we're going to have to understand what's going on. And I think, again, you're going to have to probably turn to GenAI, which is a bit of a catch-22, to provide that type of transparency because it is so complicated.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what we all hated taking exams in school, right? Just giving the answer wasn't good enough. You had to show your work. And that's what we're demanding more of with the AI models.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's actually demanding it at the moment in en masse. That's the problem. As I think people are just, man, they're in their boots and all using it without really understanding the what's going on behind the scenes. But I hope at some point it is going to become more of a must-have rather than a nice-to-have.
Well, that's something that DeepSeek reasoning model does do. It actually spits out its workings as it's doing its processing.
Pretty verbose, eh?
Very verbosely. So the OpenAI one doesn't do that. It says, well, I'll just give you a little summary of I'm thinking, just to tell you that I'm making progress, while the DeepSeek one wants to tell you it's all its iterations and thought processes, not necessarily arriving at the right conclusion, but you can see how it got there. So that is useful, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting view. I guess, talking about new things that are coming out and other kind of models, I see Microsoft has released Copilot AI agents. So quite interested to talk through kind of, I guess, what Microsoft's doing in that space and how those agents will be useful to some of our customers.
Yeah, Microsoft really does seem to be making a big bet on AI agents. They're calling it, personal assistance for everyone, backed by AI that's, of course, meant to improve our productivity. So this could be a lot of things, right? It could be examining an invoice that comes into your inbox. It could be crafting personalized presentations or summarizing, or I guess even creating progress reports, status reports for team members, and so on. An interesting thing about agents is that it's not only the typical interactive prompting that you can do with them, but you can also have ones that run autonomously in the background, which can be very useful as well. So Microsoft is leveraging Copilot Studio to create these in a no-code way, and it's even available not just for Copilot license holders, but in fact it's free to the free version as well, which again I think speaks to the fact that they really, really want to get this out there in people's hands. And another aspect that differentiates it too is, unlike a typical background agent, which does exist today, where you have to give it a very specific linear flow of if, then, or after this approved and whatnot, with these AI agents, you can just use text to describe them, just like you have gotten used to with other GenAI prompts. You just use your text and sentences and paragraphs to tell it what you want it to do and how you want it to maybe reason over it or interpret the data that goes in there, and give you the output in whatever form you like. So pretty cool that way. So I guess the big question then, is it going to be a game changer? Well, I suppose that Microsoft really isn't the first one to jump on board this idea. But then again, it really is becoming quite prolific. Whether the average user will see benefit will, I guess, depend on giving it a bit of time and putting it in enough people's hands to see if they get that cool factor out of it. I've tried it a bit myself. I've dabbled in creating some of the agents out there, and what I've found is for the simpler types of tasks is pretty straightforward, very low learning curve. But just like with anything, even no code, that a little bit more complex tasks do in fact require a bit more of a learning curve, a little more time to figure out how to get your prompting right, your descriptions right, and all that, just like we've seen in any other AI tool. So, but it's definitely something to be watching.
It intrigues me a lot because from what I've seen in my experience using the AI stuff, is it's very variable. If with any kind of task of complexity, the outputs you get can change quite, from one interaction to the next. So, when we're used to developing something, we see the right answer pop out and we say, okay, job done. That's really not the case when we use AI to do these things, because we can do the thing once and it works perfectly, and then we do it 10 times and 10% of the time it doesn't do it perfectly. And we have to be figuring out, like, well, how do we test these things? What is our confidence level that they're going to work reliably? The AI is cool and it can do a fantastic job, some of the time, most of the time, but probably not all of the time. How do we deal with that? I think that's the tricky thing, especially when it's unattended. If it's got a human in the loop component where we can see the output and then make a judgment ourselves, that's sort of easier to see working. But if we get to completely unattended agents, and we still have that little element of unreliability. How do we manage that? How do people get confidence in a solution where there's a statistical error rate? It's interesting to me.
But I think we're probably only at the beginning of the agent's journey, right? Because they're going to get smarter and more autonomous and less error prone as time goes by. And I think they will become the productivity tools of the future rather than the chat interfaces. I saw that DeepSeek had trained an agent called Devon to learn 3D video games, Xbox type of games. And it got to the point where the agents were learning from other player behavior, whereby they could actually go into a game that they hadn't played before, and based on what they'd learned, they could pretty much pick up on how to play the game very, very quickly. And that, that included skills like combat or chopping down a tree or quite sophisticated types of actions. And so, those that type of example where it can do very smart things, I reckon those are going to be commercialized in that sense, that they're going to be very, very smart, where you can and will start relying on them to do things in a commercial sense in the background more and more. That obviously is, at this point, it's scary to think that your business is going to be run by agents in the background. But, if we're talking about productivity gains and optimizing processes and try to drive more value, those are going to be the go-to types of solutions, I reckon, in the future.
Absolutely.
Speaking of driving more value, Gary, I see that BYD's partnered with DeepSeek now for their autonomous driving plans. So
really,
yeah, they said they're going to incorporate DeepSeek technology into their self-driving plans. Yeah.
Oh, that'll be very interesting. I mean,
so
that's
autonomous agents. Yeah, you might.
Yeah. I mean, that is a classic example of an autonomous agent, right? Is your self-driving car. So
also a concern about how it manages errors as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it'd be interesting to see how it compares against, the likes of Tesla and other semi-autonomous or just about autonomous driving cars.
Yeah.
That's very, very cool. It doesn't it makes sense, right? They're both Chinese.
Does make sense,
yeah. So that'll be quite cool.
So I guess we're talking about automation, and we're starting to see, how we can practically use AI in our businesses, and where I think Gary, you mentioned cognition AI, which is like the world's first AI software engineer. So you go and use cognition AI instead of hiring a software engineer, which it's crazy to imagine at this point in time. But we as we bring AI more into our businesses, what are the skills that we're actually going to need? Are we going to need prompt engineering skills, over actually, developing developer skills, and how are we going to make sure that when we're using AI in a business, that we're not bringing in biases and, like you said, that error handling, Andrew. That's,
Yeah, well, I guess that's I did mention, I think that Cognition was the company that trialed and did an agent that went and did a development task, right? It had to go and learn how to code. And at the end of it all, basically what it did was that it wrote the code. It then wrote benchmarking for test results. It did the testing, and then it created a website where it published the test results as well, right? All in the background. Now that's pretty impressive, skill set for an agent to have. And that, if that does go, mainstream and is a scalable type of solution, then yeah, it definitely changes the nature of the workforce in terms of what we do. And obviously it'll, we'll have to think very carefully about the types of people that we need to have on our, at Theta and in any company that's involved in software development, as an example, is going to have to think about the types of skills that they want to hire. And I guess it will be more around getting the most value out of AI, and being able to drive it to do the best possible, to get the most successful outcomes, rather than the mundane tasks of coding and testing, because those are skills that are very, I would say, are high up there on the list of things that probably can be replaced.
Yeah, I
I
still
don't know what you
think
guys think.
they're definitely at a point where you still need a lot of judgment about how things have been put together and review in QA. And then I guess that, like anything, could change over time. But you certainly don't want to take everything that's invented verbatim by these tools. I think what it can do is it can enable you to do things that you maybe didn't have time to do previously, say like optimization or better security testing. I think those are some of the places where you can get some really good results. And there was actually an example of one of the guys that does some excellent optimization work to take models and make them run more better on your local hardware. And he had actually used the DeepSeek reasoning tool to do some code optimization and found it quite useful. And reduce the compute cost to run a model quite significantly. So a lot of time developers, I don't think they have the time to go and do the optimization side of things, or maybe they don't have the time to do full security tests. They're busy working on the functional features. So you could say there's a big opportunity there just to improve the efficiency and performance and security of our code that we are shipping. And you don't necessarily have to take all the joy of developing new functional code out of developers' hands, because they quite like doing that. But yeah, there's still opportunities where things don't get done that could get done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about being able to expand the capacity of what teams can do and how well they can do it without, with keeping the number of people in there the same. You can have still your developers doing the hard work and doing the creative side of things and coming up with solutions to those complex problems, while leaving whether it's mundane or just those tasks that they have a hard time getting to make it better, now having bandwidth to be able to do that by handing it off to the AI agents.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes, customers have to, I guess, prioritize their budget, and, they might want features and functionality, and often, don't like to say it often, security might come, further down the priority list.
Never,
but if we
Liz,
can,
never.
but if we can make that more affordable and more accessible by using AI, then awesome.
Yeah.
Great outcome. Yeah. I guess since we last caught up, have you guys seen any examples of customers actually achieving improved efficiency and productivity through the use of AI? Like, are we seeing any real uses come through?
I haven't seen a great deal. I think people, organizations I'm talking to, are still piloting things. There's some which are looking more towards that agent style of things. We've been talking to customers about using our Theta Assist platform for creating assistants that work around project work, where it can be like your assistant for a whole project and draw in sources from everything your project's working on across teams and chats and things like that. And people seem quite keen on that being an efficient way to manage knowledge on a project, and maybe help preserve knowledge that currently exists in people's heads and various other places, and bringing that together. So there seems to be some interest in that. But I think it's an ongoing challenge of where are the best places to use this. And it was quite interesting because Anthropic released a study just this week about how people are using their tool. And that's actually quite good, because they released the full data set for that they based their study on. And it's like thousands of records of what people did in a chat summarized. You don't see all the chat that they had because they anonymize it, but they basically summarize it up and say, this person seemed to be in a product management role, and they were talking about how to prioritize features or something. That was the conversation. What was about that? So there's this data set there now. You can have a look at it and say, well, here's like thousands of use cases and scenarios that people currently use AI for. And then you can do your own kind of digging into that and go, well, here's some good scenarios that might apply to us. there's lots of people using it for this. Now it's maybe skewed towards early adopters of technology compared to how general people may use it, or the general workforce, but it's still an interesting source of ideas, I think. And I think that's the stage we're at, is people are looking for good ideas.
Yeah, I would agree. It's there's a lot of desire to, or hope to, find things out there that will help improve their business or their productivity, but maybe struggling once they really dive into it to see either what are those opportunities for us, or are they maybe more complex to get there. And that could be on the staff productivity side, which I think is a bigger focus that we're seeing. And realizing what they need to do to be prepared for that. But then there's also how can we be innovative in our business and in our offerings as well. So yeah, a lot of interest, but a slower start to that, I would say.
But I think we got to differentiate here between customers and organizations using AI for increasing productivity or driving more revenue or driving down costs, and the use of GenAI to do the same thing. We've got customers and we've implemented AI solutions, and customers have been using AI and machine learning solutions for a very long time to do just that, right? In just about every industry you can think of.
Yeah.
What we're talking about really is not AI and machine learning per se. It's the new LLMs and the new generative AI solutions. That's what we're talking about, where we're seeing possibly a slower uptake in getting them out into production, right? So just not to confuse people who may be listening to this, we're not talking about the use of what we, the old school AI and machine learning. We're talking about LLMs and that type of technology.
Yeah. And there's like, those kind of classic things like image recognition or classification, those sort of things. There's been machine learning models for those, and they do a great job. It's interesting to see that Google's Gemini model has got some really great capabilities now around PDF processing. So, the classic scanned PDF, which is a challenge to OCR, they have brought out a solution as part of their Gemini model, which does a fantastic job of doing that. So that's kind of an old school classic AI role, which an LLM is now proving to be better at. So people are starting to replace their old school OCR solutions with an LLM solution for that, for much cheaper, much faster. So there are some opportunities there which are less obvious. They're not your classic, help me generate an executive summary, but it's more help me process the scan document, and the same kind of tech can actually do that too.
Yeah, and I think there are actual examples where there are customers and companies using GenAI for exactly those types of things. There are a lot of companies using them to do exactly what we do, and that is understand RFPs and prioritize those RFPs that are actually the RFPs that we would normally go for, and make that whole process a lot more streamlined. We're doing it, and there's quite a few other companies that are doing it. I know that a lot of recruitment companies and companies that have got HR departments, big companies that are hiring, they use GenAI to scan, the thousands of CVs that they receive for every job ad. And basically, they're relying on GenAI solutions to, prioritize or filter out only those CVs that they think are the ones that have got the skills and the experience and the attributes that they're looking for. So there are some really good real-world examples where GenAI is being used to really drive more efficiency. There are risks in terms of, you may be missing out on some good candidates because for whatever reason, and that goes back to transparency and all reliability, where it filters out a really great candidate. But on the that could happen just using humans to do the same thing anyway. But there are some pretty cool and very widely used examples of GenAI in the workplace today.
Yeah, in that recruitment example, I guess it will come down to maybe a parallel, right? So to get better at GenAI, you need to be better at prompting and understanding how to best ask those questions. Well, job seekers now need to know how to best write their CVs to get picked up by the GenAI.
Well, you would have seen, I don't know if you've seen, if you go on to LinkedIn, it's got its own Copilot or AI solution that helps you go and if you're looking for a job, it will help you go and craft your CV to align to the job that you are looking to apply for. That's on, yeah, I think that's on LinkedIn Premium. So there's, that's everywhere, and that's the way I'm gonna go.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is important for an organization, to speed up the adoption of AI throughout their organization?
I think giving people access to something that's sanctioned by the company or by the organization is really important. I'm a firm believer that it's like Play-Doh. You've got to play with it. You've got to get it in your hands or get it in the hands of your staff for them to use it, feel it, do something with it to get a sense of what's possible. If it's too locked away or also too inflexible, or, too locked down and limited to do only certain tasks, then that can be a little bit hard for people to visualize what's possible. So it's great if you have a co-pilot that says, here's how to do a formula in Excel, but that's a very narrow thing. It doesn't necessarily get your imagination going about what else might be possible with AI. It's useful, but it doesn't necessarily enlighten the organization. So I think giving everybody access to something, whatever it is, but in a kind of open way is quite a good way of getting going. But then you also need, like any new initiative, you need change management. You need people to get behind it. You need champions. You need regular program surrounding that of like incentives, because it's not easy to change people's habits overnight and introduce a new thing into their work life. That takes effort. So yeah, change management and change champions are part of that story.
Yeah, because like you said, Andrew, giving them a sanctioned environment to do that in is key. A place where the company knows that data privacy isn't going to be a problem. And if you don't give them that, well, they're going to find a different tool to use anyway. It'll just be without those guardrails around it. So yeah, it's really important to, like you said, to give them something to try to work with. Otherwise, you lose control.
Well, the people that are keen and early adopters will get outside of your organization and do shadow AI, and the people that are nervous and not sure what to do won't do anything. So you kind of got a problem both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think it's show and tell, right? So you've got, there's always going to be people that are really good and curious and get out there and find a really good use case for using GenAI. And if they can share that with the rest of the people in the company, people in their teams, people, that then starts, that gets the adoption going. Because if other people can see how good or how much a solution helps them, that'll drive up more adoption. So I think when you get people trying out things in isolation and getting good results, but not actually publicizing what they're doing and how they're doing it and what the time is that they're saving or what, all that, then that is like anything else that happens in a silo or anything that, nothing grows in the dark. So I think you do have to make sure that if you are in an organization where you want to drive adoption, you got to make sure that you're getting people to collaborate. You got to have, like you said, sponsors and champions that go out there and show other people, what can be done and how it can really be a time saver or a productivity or an efficiency tool. So yeah, I think the carrot is, incentivizing people to go out there and do it, and then spread the knowledge and spread the good news once they've done it.
Oh. Awesome. I think we're getting close to the end of our time. Thanks so much for everyone's input. It's been a really interesting discussion. I appreciate everyone's feedback on the questions. To close off, I'm going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to ask you a question, since we're in the new year, one for the new year. What new tech gadget are you excited about that's coming up that you're going to start using, maybe, hopefully? Jeff, do you want to start off?
Yeah, well, I think for me, it might actually be time to finally start using a robot vac at home. There's been a couple of new technology advances, or even just practical ones in there, like a little articulating arm that can reach and pick things up that are in its way. But I thought that might be something it might be about time now for me to do one of those.
Very cool. Do you have a cat? Can you take a picture of your cat riding
That's a
around?
whole nother problem to solve, is not being afraid of the cat, or the cat not being afraid of it. Yes.
Awesome. How about you, Andrew? Excited about any gadgets?
I mean, I like listening to music, and I see that JBL's brought out a new kind of headphone. It's probably not particularly exciting, other than the innovation there is they've put a little extra dongle that you can connect to all sorts of devices, including, your airplane seat, your laptop, your phone. So it's like a little kind of control panel that you can connect to. So that looks pretty neat, actually. I'm always in the market for a good set of headphones.
Nice. Tell you what, I was traveling around Brazil over summer, and everyone had these massive JBL kind of speakers they would carry around with them, blaring you. It's very popular brand.
Like old boom boxes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, and they have ones that you can even wheel along as well.
What?
It's awesome.
Really? Incredible.
Yeah. Gary, how about you?
No, actually, I don't have any gadgets that I'm like excited about. I am excited that I rewired my Jeep to have whole new set of digital LED lights back in front, which makes it look very, very cool. But if somebody can come up with a really easy, automated way for a stick thrower for my dog, that'll really solve my shoulder problems. So any kind of automated stick thrower, I'm keen to hear about.
Awesome.
Cool.
All righty, on that note, thanks everyone for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
So yeah, bye.
Bye.